Imagine standing at your father's casket. Tears are blurring your vision. You look up, hoping for comfort, but your stepmother isn't looking at you. She's checking her diamond-encrusted watch. That was Audrey Miller's reality. Her father was the richest man in the county. When he died, everyone expected a war over his millions. But what happened in that lawyer's office wasn't a war. It was a massacre. They took the mansion, the cars, the private jet. They stripped Audrey of everything until she had nothing left but a rusted key to a rotting, termite-infested shack in the woods. Her stepmother laughed as Audrey signed the deed. She thought she had won. But she didn't know that the ruined house was hiding a secret buried under 70 years of dust and concrete. This is the story of how a worthless inheritance became the ultimate revenge. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're watching from? And what city are you in right now? The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime stick. Audrey stood outside the glass doors of Sterling and Associates. She was 26 years old. Her black dress was pinned at the waist because she'd stopped eating the week her father died. Thomas Miller had been a titan, a self-made mogul. But to Audrey, he was just Dad, the man who taught her to fish and read to her until his voice went hoarse. Then came Patricia. Inside the conference room, the air was stifling. Patricia Miller, Audrey's stepmother of 5 years, sat at the head of the table. She wasn't crying. She was scrolling on her phone. Beside her sat Chad, Patricia's son. He was 22, wearing a suit that cost more than Audrey's car, picking dirt out from under his nails with a gold toothpick. "Can we move this along?" Patricia snapped. "I have a flight to Aspen at 6. "Your husband's body isn't even cold," Audrey whispered. Chad snorted. "It's a transaction, sis. That's all life is. Maybe if you visited more, you'd know that." That was the lie that stung the most. Patricia had spent years blocking Audrey's calls and changing the locks on the family estate. She had turned Audrey's own father into a stranger. The door opened. Arthur Sterling, the family lawyer for 40 years, walked in. He looked exhausted. He wouldn't look Audrey in the eye. That was the first red flag. "Let's skip the fluff, Arthur," Patricia said. "Just read the numbers." Sterling sighed and broke the wax seal. "To my wife, Patricia," he began, "I leave the primary residence on Lakeview Drive, all art, all vehicles, and the liquid cash in the joint accounts, totaling $18 million. Patricia exhaled, a smirk playing on her lips. "To my stepson, Chad," Sterling continued, "I leave the Miller dealerships and the vacation home in Cabo." Chad pumped his fist. "Yes." Audrey felt a cold numbness. It wasn't about the money. It was the silence. Her father hadn't even mentioned her name. Then, Sterling cleared his throat. His eyes were sad. "And to my daughter, Audrey." The room went silent. "I leave the property located at 89 Blackwood Lane." Patricia blinked. Then she started to laugh. A cruel, high-pitched sound. "Blackwood? You mean that hunting shack? The one he bought to tear down?" "That is the extent of the bequest," Sterling said, closing the folder. He slid a heavy, rusted iron key across the table. It looked like something from a horror movie. "He gave you a pile of garbage," Chad cackled. "The place is condemned. It's a liability. You'll spend more on property taxes than the land is worth." Patricia stood up, straightening her skirt. "He finally saw you for what you are, Audrey. A disappointment." They swept out of the room, leaving Audrey alone in the silence. "Mr. Sterling," Audrey whispered. "Why? Was he confused at the end?" Sterling walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. He looked at the door to make sure Patricia was gone. "Your father was the sharpest man I ever knew, Audrey. He wrote this will 2 weeks ago. He told me." Patricia looks at the price tag. Audrey looks at the value. "Trust him. Go to the house." The drive took 4 hours, deep into the part of the state where cell service dies and the roads turn to gravel. When Audrey's old Honda crunched up the driveway, her heart sank. Patricia hadn't been exaggerating. The house was a disaster. A 2-story Victorian that looked like a bruise on the landscape. The roof sagged. The windows were boarded up with rotting plywood. The front porch looked like a mouth with missing teeth. "Thanks, Dad," Audrey muttered, fighting back tears. "Thanks a lot." She stepped out into the mud. The air smelled of wet pine and decay. She reached the front door and tried the rusted key. It didn't budge. "Great," she sighed. She looked for a rock to break a window, but then she heard a sound. Snap. Audrey spun around. An old man stood at the edge of the woods. He was holding a double-barreled shotgun. His face was weathered like old leather. "You lost, Missy?" he growled. I own this place," Audrey stammered, holding up the key. "I'm Audrey Miller." The man's expression changed instantly. The suspicion vanished. He slung the gun over his shoulder and walked toward her. "Tommy's girl? Well, I'll be damned. You got his eyes. I'm Silas. I live up the ridge." "Did you know my father?" Silas chuckled. "Know him? I helped him pour the foundation for the shed 30 years ago. He told me you might come. Sorry for your loss, kid. Tommy was a good man." "My stepmother doesn't think so," Audrey said bitterly. "She got the mansion. I got this." Silas looked at the house, then back at Audrey. A strange glint appeared in his eye. "Don't judge a book by its cover. Your daddy spent more time out here than he ever spent in that fancy office." "Doing what?" "Feeding the termites." "Thinking," Silas said. "And building. Here, let me help you with that door. It's a trick lock. You have to lift the handle while you turn." Silas took the key. He lifted, turned, and with a heavy clunk, the bolt slid back. "Be careful," Silas warned. "The floorboards are soft." Audrey stepped inside. It was pitch black. She turned on her phone flashlight. The interior was haunting. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin. Furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like ghosts in the dark. Suddenly, the lights flickered and hummed to life. "Generators out back," Silas called from the door. "I've kept them gassed up. Tommy paid me to keep the place ready for you." Audrey walked into the living room. Above the fireplace hung a portrait of her father. It was slashed diagonally. Water damage? Or a message? Then she saw it. On the mantel sat a red envelope. It was the only thing in the house without a layer of dust. Her name was written on it in her father's bold handwriting. She tore it open. Inside was a single card. "Patricia thinks wealth is what you show the world. I taught you that wealth is what you keep hidden. The house is a test, Audrey. If you had sold it immediately, you would have gotten nothing. But you came inside. Now look down." Audrey looked at her feet. She was standing on a moth-eaten rug. She knelt and pulled the rug back. The floorboards here were different. They were arranged in a herringbone pattern. In the center was a small, circular hole. "Silas," Audrey whispered, "do you have a crowbar?" "Don't need one," Silas said. "That's a puzzle latch. Tommy loved his games. Twist it." Audrey put her finger in the hole and twisted. Thud. A 3-foot section of the floor popped up on hydraulic hinges. A steel ladder descended into the darkness. Audrey shone her light down. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a concrete bunker. And the air coming up was cool, dry, and filtered. Audrey took a breath and stepped onto the first rung. She was about to find out that her father hadn't left her a house. He had left her a war chest. The ladder felt like it went down forever, 30 feet into the cold earth. Above her, the square of light from the living room looked like a tiny postage stamp. Her boots hit solid concrete. "Find the switch on the right," Silas yelled down. Audrey fumbled against the cold wall and flipped a heavy industrial toggle. Thrum. One by one, rows of overhead lights buzzed to life. Audrey gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She wasn't in a cellar. She was in a high-tech vault. The room was massive, over 1,000 square feet of reinforced concrete. The air smelled of ozone and crisp, new paper. To the left, metal shelves were stacked with heavy plastic bins. To the right, dozens of filing cabinets. In the center sat a glass desk with 3 massive computer monitors. Audrey walked to the desk. On top was a leather notebook and a silver thumb drive. She opened the notebook. It was a ledger. Her father's firm, precise handwriting filled the pages. March 12th. $500,000 transferred to Cayman via Shell Corp Alpha. April 4th. Sale of vintage car collection. $2.2 million cash. Audrey's heart hammered. For the last 3 years, the exact time Patricia had been isolating him, Thomas Miller had been quietly gutting his own empire. He wasn't losing his mind. He was moving his money out of Patricia's reach. She ran to the plastic bins and popped a lid. Vacuum-sealed bricks of $100 bills. She opened the next. Gold bars, wrapped in velvet. She opened a third and started to sob. It was her mother's jewelry. The sapphire necklace Patricia claimed was lost. The diamond brooch Audrey wore to prom. It was all here. "Oh, Dad," she whispered. "You left me everything." She sat at the desk and plugged in the thumb drive. The screens hummed. Biometric scan required. She placed her thumb on the reader. Access granted. "Welcome, Audrey." A video popped up. Her father looked thin, his skin pale, but his eyes were like flint. "Audrey," the video Thomas said, his voice raspy. "If you're seeing this, the vultures have picked my bones clean. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I couldn't risk them finding out." He leaned closer to the camera. "Patricia isn't just a gold digger. She's a criminal. 3 years ago, I caught her short-selling my company's stock. She was betting on my death to make a fortune. And Chad? He's been laundering money for a cartel through my dealerships." Audrey felt sick. "I couldn't divorce her," Thomas continued. "She would have frozen the accounts and destroyed your inheritance. So I played the fool. While she was busy measuring drapes for her mansion, I was moving the foundation out from under her." He smiled, a sharp, triumphant look. "The Will Sterling read today? Those companies are shells. The stocks are worthless. The Lakeview mansion? It's mortgaged to the hilt. In 30 days, the bank is taking it back. Patricia thinks she has millions. What she actually has is $40 million in debt." Audrey let out a jagged laugh. "But you, Audrey, the cash in this room is $50 million. It's yours. And the files in those cabinets? That's the evidence. Insider trading, bribes, money laundering. You have the leverage now. Give them hell, Peanut." The screen went black. Audrey sat in the silence. The tears were gone. A cold, hard resolve took their place. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the executioner. The next morning, the sun revealed how ugly the property really was. Audrey had slept in the bunker. She spent all night reading the files. She knew things now, terrible, powerful things. She came up at 8 a.m. Silas was on the porch, fixing a step. "Car coming," he grunted, pointing his hammer. A bright yellow Porsche Cayenne was bouncing up the gravel driveway. It looked ridiculous against the mud and rotting wood. "Chad," Audrey said, her voice dropping. "Want me to handle him?" Silas asked, reaching for his hammer. "No," Audrey said. "Stay close. But I need to do this." Chad hopped out of the car. He wore a white linen suit and designer shades. He looked at the house with pure disgust. "Audrey," he called out with a fake smile. "My God, you look like a squatter. What do you want, Chad?" "Look, Mom and I felt bad. We really did. You can't live in this dump. The county is going to fine you into bankruptcy." He pulled a paper from his pocket. "We want to help. We'll take the property off your hands. Bulldoze it for a tax write-off. We'll give you $50,000 cash. You can go back to your little apartment and finally buy a new car." Audrey walked down the steps. She stopped 3 feet from him. She could smell his expensive cologne and his fear. He was twitchy. "Why are you really here, Chad?" "I told you we're helping family." "Patricia doesn't help family. She eats them." Audrey tilted her head. "Is it the zoning? Or did she find out this worthless land sits on the largest natural aquifer in the county? Did she already sell the water rights to Nestle?" Chad froze. His smile died. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," Audrey said. "And I think you're in a rush because you owe a man named Vargas in Vegas a lot of money. Something about a poker debt." Chad went ghost white. "How do you know that name?" "Dad knew everything." He watched you siphon $200,000 from the dealership to pay your bookie. Chad's eyes darted to Silas. You're lying, Chad hissed. You have nothing. I have the house, Audrey said. And I'm not selling. Not for 50,000. Not for 50 million. Now get off my property before I tell the police about the kilo of powder you keep in your spare tire well. That was a total bluff, but Chad's jaw dropped. You're crazy, he screamed. Go, Audrey yelled. Chad scrambled into his Porsche and floored it, fishtailing wildly through the mud. Did he really have coke in the tire? Silas asked, impressed. I have no idea, Audrey breathed, her knees shaking. But for a guy like Chad, it was a safe bet. Audrey didn't wait for them to come back. She went back to the bunker and searched for a folder labeled Project Black Widow. Inside, she found a marriage certificate. Not for Patricia and Thomas, but for Patricia and a man named Julian Vane. The date was 6 years ago. Patricia had married Thomas 5 years ago. Audrey scrolled through the files. There was no divorce decree. Oh my God, Audrey whispered. She's a bigamist. If the marriage was never legal, Patricia wasn't the wife. And if she wasn't the wife, the will, which left everything to my wife, was void. Silas, Audrey called out. How fast can we get to Reno? Reno was a city of neon lights and broken dreams. It was the perfect place for a man like Julian Vane to hide. Audrey used the bunker's secret funds to charter a private jet. By Wednesday morning, she and her new lawyer, Bernie the Pitbull Kozlowski, were sitting in a greasy diner off the main strip. Bernie was 70 years old, had been disbarred twice, and knew the law better than the devil himself. You sure he's coming? Bernie asked, stabbing a piece of bacon. Silas's private investigator was clear, Audrey said, her eyes on the door. He's a creature of habit. At 10:05 a.m., the door jangled. A man walked in. He looked like a faded version of his old mugshot, hair dyed a tragic shade of black, wearing a polyester suit that had seen better decades. Audrey and Bernie slid into the booth next to him. Mr. Vane, Audrey said. Julian jumped, nearly knocking over his coffee. I don't have the money yet. Tell Tony I just need until Friday. We're not with Tony, Audrey said. She slid a heavy envelope across the table. Julian peeked inside. When he saw the stacks of hundreds, his panic turned into a greedy grin. I'm listening. Who are you? I'm the daughter of the man your wife is currently living with, Audrey said. Julian's face went slack. Patricia? Oh no, that woman is a viper. She paid me 50 grand to disappear 6 years ago. Said she found a bigger fish. Did you ever sign divorce papers, Julian? Bernie asked. Julian laughed. Divorce costs money. She said she'd handle the paperwork in Mexico. I figured she just forged my signature. She forges everything. Audrey felt a rush of adrenaline. The trap was set. 2 days later, the probate hearing was packed. The local news had picked up the scent of a family feud. Patricia sat at the front, looking like a queen. She wore a Chanel suit and a mourning veil that didn't hide her smug expression. She had 3 high-priced lawyers flanking her, all paid for on credit. The judge banged his gavel. We are here to finalize the estate of Thomas Miller. Patricia's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, the will is clear. The entirety of the estate goes to the widow, Patricia Miller. The daughter, Audrey, received her shack. We ask for the immediate release of all frozen accounts. Objection, Bernie barked, standing up. He looked like a bulldog in a cheap suit. On what grounds, Mr. Kozlowski? The judge sighed. On the grounds that there is no widow in this room, Bernie said, his voice booming. The gallery erupted in whispers. Patricia turned, her eyes narrowing into slits. How dare you? Thomas Miller's will leaves his fortune to his wife, Bernie continued, walking toward the judge. But according to the state of Nevada, Patricia was already married to another man when she wed Mr. Miller. No divorce was ever filed. The marriage was a fraud from day one. That's a lie, Patricia shrieked, her poise shattering. It's a forgery. Is it? Bernie smiled. The defense calls Mr. Julian Vane. The double doors at the back of the room swung open. Audrey didn't turn around. She watched Patricia's face. She watched the blood drain from her stepmother's cheeks until she looked like a ghost. Julian walked down the aisle in a brand new suit, flanked by 2 security guards Audrey had hired. He stopped right next to Patricia, looked her up and down, and winked. "Long time no see, Patty," Julian said. "You still owe me for that honeymoon in Vegas." The courtroom turned into a riot. The judge hammered his gavel until it nearly snapped. "Order. Silence." He looked at Patricia's lawyers. They were staring at their feet. They knew. "In light of this evidence," the judge declared, "the bequests to Patricia Miller are hereby suspended. Given the marriage was void, she has no claim to the spousal share." He turned to Audrey. "Under the law, the remainder of the estate, the mansion, the billions in assets, the company shares, reverts to the sole surviving next of kin. Miss Audrey Miller, you are the owner of the Miller estate." Patricia let out a scream that sounded like a dying animal. "No, it's mine. I put up with that old fool for 5 years. Deputies," the judge ordered, "arrest this woman for perjury, fraud, and bigamy." As they dragged Patricia out in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Audrey. She expected to see a smirk, but Audrey just looked at her with pity. Chad didn't even make it out of the parking lot. The FBI was waiting by his yellow Porsche. They had the files from the bunker. Money laundering, cartel connections. He was tackled onto his own hood before he could even start the engine. 2 hours later, Audrey pulled up to the Lakeview mansion in a town car. The staff was lined up at the door, terrified they were about to be fired. Audrey walked up to the head housekeeper, a woman who had been forced to spy on her for years. "It's okay," Audrey said gently. "Everyone gets a 20% raise. But I have one instruction. Pack up everything that belonged to Patricia and Chad. Every dress, every shoe, every gold toothpick. And send it where, ma'am?" "Burn it," Audrey said. She turned to Silas. "I'm giving this mansion to the Children's Hospital. My dad always wanted to help them. I don't want to live here. This place is full of ghosts." "Then where are you going?" Silas asked. "You're a billionaire, kid. You could buy an island." Audrey smiled. "I already have a home. It just needs a little work." 6 months later, the sun set over 89 Blackwood Lane. The rot was gone. The roof was slate gray. The porch was brand new with a swing and hanging flowers. It was the most beautiful cottage in the county. Audrey sat on the swing, a cup of tea in her hand. Silas was in the yard, officially retired from being a hermit to become her estate manager. She picked up the last thing she had found in the bunker. It wasn't a gold bar or a ledger. It was a photo album. The first photo was black and white. It showed a young Thomas Miller and a beautiful woman standing in front of this very shack. Under it, her father had written, "First day at our first home. We don't have a dime, but we have each other." 1978. The twist wasn't that the house was a vault. The twist was that this was the only place her father had ever been truly happy. He hadn't sent her to a ruin to punish her. He had sent her home. He knew Patricia only saw price tags. He knew she would never look twice at a worthless shack. By giving Audrey the ruined house, he ensured that the only pure thing he ever owned went to the only person who truly loved him. Audrey closed the album and looked at the trees. She had the money, she had the truth, and she had a home no one could ever take away. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. "I love it here."